Welcome back to the YogaHub podcast. This is the second part of our two-part series where we talk a little bit more about our yoga teacher trainings here at YogaHub. So if you didn't catch the first episode, you might go back. We discuss a little bit about our journeys from being yoga teachers to yoga trainers, and we talk a little bit about the YogaHub training. But in this episode, we're going to be focusing a little bit more on the frequently asked questions that we get about the teacher trainings at YogaHub. So thank you for everyone who has submitted a question for this episode as well. But before we go into the questions, I think what we might just start with is the big question that we get asked all the time is, how is the YogaHub 200-hour training structured? So maybe Brian, can you talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, so we currently run two types of trainings at the YogaHub, or two types of yoga teacher trainings. Our first one is a part-time course, which takes place over 6 months, 10 modules, so 10 weekends over those 6 months. And over the course, we basically try to give all of the most important foundational knowledge that you might need when it comes to teaching a effective and impactful yoga class. So we look a little bit at the history of the practice of yoga and some of the key philosophical concepts that come from the teachings. We look a little bit at anatomy, so some basic stuff around the musculoskeletal system, the nervous system, breathing stuff, because obviously breathing is a very important part of our yoga practice. Important to note, because I think a lot of people get a little bit intimidated by the anatomy side of things, is that you don't have to have the anatomical knowledge of a physiotherapist in order to teach a good yoga class. But as yoga teachers, we will be asking people to do things with their bodies. So we do have a bit of a responsibility to understand some of the basics around how the human body works. So that's what we look at, not like overly intense in terms of the anatomy that we cover, and always trying to make it like directly relatable to both the practicing and teaching of yoga. And then we also look a lot at like teaching methodology. So teaching techniques, whether that's the use of voice, the use of touch, how to sequence classes in different ways. And it's all geared towards our final assessment, which is the trainees teaching a 30-minute vinyasa style yoga practice to basically display everything that they have learned over the course. Important to note that this course isn't in any way set up to like fail people or be overly critical. So even though we're calling it an assessment, I always just say to people that it's just another type of practice. Just a type of practice you get a lot of feedback on. But it's all with the intention of just helping the trainees develop their skills as yoga teachers. Now, with our 6-month courses, there is like an online component. So we have a online teaching platform, which has a lot of pre-recorded lectures, which people watch in advance of some of the weekends that we're in. The intention behind that is not to give people more work than is necessary, but just some of the more information-heavy lectures that we cover, we do that online so that the weekends can be a little bit more practical. And also so that people then have the lectures to watch in their own pace and refer back to at a later date if it's useful. Also in the online platform, we have some pre-recorded classes that people can do. We give loads of like recommended reading and podcasts that people can listen to. So yeah, really just to round out the course a little bit more. I think that's most of the important things in the structure of the 6-month course that I can think of. And then we also run a 3-month intensive training during the summer months, which 3 weeks, 3 months would be very intense. So a 3-week intensive training, which as the name suggests, for 3 weeks, we are in 6 days a week. And so it is more or less the same content of the 6-month trainings, just condensed into 3 weeks. So because of that, we don't have the online component. People who do the intensive training still get access to all of the online material, but they're not required to go home and watch online lectures after our days that we're together. But it's basically just all the same stuff within 3 weeks. I think there's pros and cons to both. Obviously, with the part-time training, you can still live the rest of your life, mostly around that training. Some people really enjoy the longer format in terms of processing the information, giving themselves time to put the information into practice. And then with the 3-week trainings, as the name sort of suggests, like, it is intense. We're practicing every day, we're learning every day. But within that intensity, it can almost like, I think, like supercharge your learning a little bit, because you're in it. It's like your main focus for those 3 weeks. So not to say one is any better than the other. There's kind of pros to both. But yeah, that's generally how we structure our courses. Did I miss out on anything important? I think that's most of the important stuff. Yeah. There you go. Happy days.
Great. Thank you so much, Brian. That was fantastic. So we might move on to some of the other kind of frequently asked questions that we get from people who are interested in doing the 200-hour courses here. So big one that we get a lot is like in terms of what level you might need to be to do a training. We get asked, do I need to have a certain amount of experience, certain amount of years practicing? Do I need to be flexible? So maybe Shane, what do you think about that question?
You have to be able to do arm balances and handstands, and that's obviously a joke. You don't need to have any of that. And I always think that the people that have not less experience, but not so much experience, come in with much more of an open mind to the practice. And they're the people that go on the most amount of journey. That being said, like, if you've got a strong practice, doesn't mean you can't come in and do it. But I always feel the people that come in with that much more open mind to learn really go through that like longer, bigger journey. I came in with that kind of an attitude, and I felt that I learned so much from it. And then we teach as much as we can about the practice throughout it, and don't need to be flexible, don't need to know about the philosophy of yoga, don't need to know about the subtle body aspect of the practice. That's what you're there to learn from the training. Yeah, so there's no recommended level. I mean, go to a couple of classes is what I would recommend. Do you like yoga? I would definitely recommend that. That being said, we did have somebody come in who wanted to just learn how to teach yoga and didn't have a yoga practice. And she flew through it. It was amazing to see that journey happen because they just set their mind to it. Yeah, so I just always say come in with an open mind and see where it takes you. Yeah, anything to add to that, Brian?
No, I always think you get a little bit more from it if you're coming into the training kind of in your practice, if you know what I mean. If you're kind of coming in with a small bit of consistency in your practice, you tend to, it just sets you off on a good footing, I think. But when I say that, I'm not saying that means you need to be practicing 5 days a week or even like 2 days a week. But, coming into it with a little feeling of the practice in your body can be a good, like, front foot forward kind of thing. But it's absolutely not essential. And with these trainings, what I think we try to do, and what I think we do relatively well, is we try to focus on like the foundational stuff. So it's not like you come in on the first day, we're all doing handstands. We focus on like the foundational building blocks of the practice. And where then you want those building blocks to take you is kind of down to your own intention, your own motivation behind practicing and teaching. Because some people come to yoga to learn how to do handstands. Some people come to yoga to learn how to lie down on the ground and rest for 5 minutes a little bit better. So, yeah, we try our best to focus on the foundations that allows you to then take the practice in the directions that interest you most. But yeah, no required level. I actually nearly dropped out of my first teacher training that I ever did the day before, because I did it in India, and I went and I was in India for a few weeks beforehand, and I thought I was okay at yoga, but then I started doing practices with this like Indian guy on the beach every morning, and I'd been doing a lot of like vinyasa yoga. This guy's basically doing all like hatha, like seated postures, and I was like, I am crap at this. What the hell am I doing going to a teacher training? And I actually looked up the website to be like, can I cancel? Can I get like my money back? And just funny enough, on the website, it had a little section talking about what we're talking about now, is like, do you need to be flexible? And it was saying that like, no, it's kind of similar to change. Come with an open mind, see where it takes you. So I went, and I was still crap, but I had a nice time. And so yeah, I think the most important thing ahead of any level, your experience, if you're working with injuries, whatever it might be. It's just an eagerness to learn. And if you have that eagerness to learn, yeah, that kind of trumps everything else.
And just to add to that, because I had this conversation with a student recently, they were going away and they wanted to go on a retreat. And I said, would you not be interested in doing a training? And they said, oh, I wouldn't be ready for something like that. And this person had quite a strong asana practice. And I couldn't believe that their head thought that they weren't ready to do a training. So like, even if you think that like it's not for you, you're not ready for it, I really suggest getting in touch with one of us, getting in touch with the studio to have that conversation, because you'd be surprised.
So another question that we get quite often is from people who they want to do the teacher training, but they're doing it just to deepen their practice. They don't really have the intention to teach after or to turn it into a career. Like, what would you say to those people?
I think, because it's a question that we would often get asked, and the way it often gets phrased to me is it okay to do this as like a personal development thing rather than, specifically to want to teach yoga? And I actually think, not to dismiss the motivation to want to teach yoga, I actually think first and foremost it should be for personal development. I think, although it is a teacher training course and we focus on teaching practice and teaching techniques and all these things, I almost think to a certain degree it's good to, at the beginning of the course, to almost put the actual teaching prospect to one side, and just use the course in terms of developing your own practice, developing your confidence, developing your communication skills. And even if you don't particularly want to teach, like if that's not your end goal, one of the best ways to learn more about a thing is to try and teach that thing or share that thing with other people. And that's always the word that I actually always prefer to use, is sharing. In the context of what we're doing, I don't love the word teaching, because for me, teaching has almost this like hierarchical nature of teacher and student and all that sort of stuff. And that's not to dismiss that relationship, which is obviously really important. But the way I prefer to think of it is that what we're doing is we're taking the things that we have found beneficial and we're trying to share them with other people. And that process of learning to share is a great way to learn a bit more about the thing that you're finding beneficial. And then in my experience, this is not always the case, but in my experience, as you learn a bit more about why this thing makes you feel good, hopefully, as you learn a bit more about how to share that thing mindfully, most people come to realize, actually, I wouldn't mind teaching yoga. This is a really nice thing to do. So I think it's good to go in to just take it as something to develop your own practice and skills. But you probably surprise yourself when it comes to the end of a course. The desire to teach may well be there, even if it wasn't at the beginning. What do you guys think?
No, and I really like the way the course is structured, in that the beginning, the first like 5 modules of the course is very much the philosophy, the anatomy, the subtle body. It's not so much based around the teaching. So you learn the stuff first. And then as we move through the second half of the training, then it's when we start to look at the teaching aspect of it with all the other stuff weaved in. But I do really like that you have that time at the beginning to not have to jump straight in, to have to stand in front of everybody and teach straight away. So I really like the way that is structured into the course. Yeah.
And I also think, because sometimes if you take the course, you might start to feel, that's the right way to put it, like some people might feel like almost like an obligation to teach if you have done a teacher training course. And I'm sure you guys probably had a similar experience, that if you're doing a course, you might get friends or family being like, oh, when are you going to teach? When are you going to teach? Will you teach me? Or something like that. But one of my favorite like experiences that I had in our training courses was a lady did one with us a few years ago. And she was so nervous about teaching. Like she was really, she was anxious about the whole thing. And as we went through the course, she would like skip some of the teaching stuff. Like she'd take convenient bathroom breaks and all this sort of stuff. But as we kept going, she just gradually started to build a little bit more confidence. And then when it came to her final assessment, I was the one that was evaluating it. And she was amazing. Like she was absolutely amazing. And when I was chatting to her afterwards, I was like, how far you've come, like you've done so well. Like, do you want to teach now? And she was like, absolutely not. She was like, I have realized through this that I have no interest in teaching yoga. I just want to practice yoga. But she was like, but what I have learned in terms of communication and confidence, and she was like, that's going to stand with me forever. So yeah, even if you never go on to actually teach yoga, you can still gain a lot. And I also think that like you can teach informally, like you can teach just through how you talk to people, how you live your life, and there's things within the practice of yoga that can make a big difference with that kind of stuff. So yeah, you definitely don't want to have to teach, but yeah, you might surprise yourself by the time you come to the end of the whole thing.
You kind of covered this already, I think, when we were talking about the course overview. But I suppose like another question I would get a lot is if I join the course, like what is the, I suppose, the time commitment outside of our contact hours? Like, are we expecting them to go to classes a certain amount of time per week? Are they logging classes? Is there extra reading? Is there other homework that they need to like take into account?
So with the 3-month course, or the 3-month, with the 3-week, I don't recommend you do a lot of practice around that. I personally did, and it didn't do me any favors. I had like my wrists strapped and everything, and it was just like really silly things that I was doing there. But when you're on that 3-week one, you're going to be doing enough practice in the room. So that one, go home, take breaks, rest as much as you can during that one. With the 3-month one or the 6-month one, there is outside reading, suggested reading. There is, as Brian said, on the online platform, there's lots of classes on there that we do suggest that you do as much as you can, because the more you practice, the more you're going to be able to teach the practice. You're going to like learn things around sequencing, cueing. You'll pick that stuff up as you're teaching or as you're practicing. And then with regards to, what was the other thing you asked?
Outside, like going to classes?
Going to classes. I always recommend that people go to class, even if it's just one class. If you just go to one class a week, you're going to learn something in somebody's class. And I always recommend, especially on your training, to go to as many teachers as you can. And try to find, because it's not like my teaching, Suzy's teaching, and Brian's teaching are going to be very different styles of teaching. And you will kind of resonate with a teacher. And even though you resonate with the teacher, I always say as well, go to other teachers, find different styles. Like when I first started practicing, it would have been a very strong, hot vinyasa class. And now, like, I always give this story, Brian. I was always told, go to Brian's class. It's so good. It's so good. And I went to Brian's class, and my brain is like quick, fast, fiery. You can hear the way that I'm talking. And Brian's a bit more chilled. So I went into Brian's and I was like, come on, man, hurry it up, right? But now it's one of my favorite classes to go to, because it's the one that I go into where I really come out of it like I feel like I'm stoned when I come out of your class. It feels so chilled, so relaxed, and I get the yoga. So you'll find different teachers and you'll resonate with different teachers. But even though you find the one that, sorry, I went off on a complete tangent here. Yeah, even though you find the one that you resonate with, I always do say, go to other teachers as well. And like learn different aspects, different avenues of the practice, because it's not just vinyasa, strong, fast class. Yeah, so I do recommend you go to classes, yes, in a long-winded way.
Any tangent where you start saying nice things about me, Shane. Is
Okay, great.
Yeah, and I think in terms of additional stuff, as Shane was saying, like we don't track how many classes you're going to. Like we're not putting pressure on anybody to go to X number of classes or anything like that. But we would hope that you would. And as Shane was saying, like the more you can be in the practice, particularly as you're going through the training course and stuff, the more you get out of it. We have an extensive manual that you get for the course, which has a lot of stuff around the anatomy, the philosophy, and we suggest readings from that in advance of certain weekends. We also have an asana manual, which is a book which basically breaks down a lot of the foundational poses and potential cues that you can use and modifications of these poses. So through that and the online platform that I mentioned earlier, we try to equip you with as much information as might be useful in terms of your learning. But at the same time, we're not necessarily like I said, putting massive amounts of pressure on anybody to, you have to do X number of classes a week or anything like that. Yeah.
What I love about the online lectures is that you can go back and watch them. Sometimes the anatomy, it's a lot of new information for a lot of us, and just hearing it for the first time, it kind of takes a little bit of repetition. So I love the way that now you have access to go back and actually review for as long as you want throughout the course. So
yeah, and that was kind of the motivation behind the pre-recording of certain lectures. Because, yeah, sometimes in the past, our course is accredited by Yoga Alliance, and with Yoga Alliance, who are I guess you call them like a governing body of yoga teacher trainings, there's things that you have to cover on yoga teacher trainings. So you have to cover X number of hours on anatomy, you have to cover X number of hours in philosophy, and so on and so forth. But sometimes when we do the anatomy lectures, just for example, in person, it would be like 2 hours of a decent little bit of information. And then you're kind of moving on. The nature of the course, you've got more stuff to cover. So we kind of like move on from that. And for some people, I'm sure it was kind of like, wait a minute, what was that first thing that we were talking about in that lecture? So now with the pre-recorded lectures, and you have access to that for, I don't know, as long as that site exists, you can go back to it, in terms of like reviewing things, or, maybe even hopefully for some people like 3 years down the line, it'd be like, oh, what was that little thing we covered in the philosophy lecture? And go back and check it out. So yeah, it's only a recent thing that we've been doing with the pre-recorded lectures, but we've been getting some really positive feedback from it, and I think it's made a big difference to delivery of the courses so far.
just another question that sometimes I'll get is like, what is a typical teacher training day? Like, what does it entail? What to expect?
So the way that it was structured on the last one was the weekend one was done where it would have been like very heavily anatomy focused, then very heavily philosophy focused, then teaching practice, then subtle body. Whereas now, and I think is a much nicer way to look at it, so that it's not so heavy on one subject, is come in the morning, do a practice, then after practice, little break, then you might move on to a lecture around anatomy. And we'll just say, for instance, we would do a shoulder practice to begin the day, and then we might do some anatomy around the shoulders after the practice, just so that that starts to make sense in the body. And then we might take a break, and then afterwards we might switch gear completely, and then we might go on to some philosophy stuff. And then we like to end the day, if we have time, which most of us normally run out of time, with a much more winding down practice. Slower practice, wind down, maybe a bit of breath work and meditation, just to wind the day down. And that's generally the day for both trainings, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, usually practice, a little bit of a breakdown of the practice afterwards, whether it's the poses or maybe the anatomy that we've been focusing on in that practice, a discussion around something relating to philosophy or subtle body, and then as best we can, we finish with something chill. And as the course progresses, we get more and more into teaching practice. And I do feel that's something that we do quite well. If I was to compare it to, say, the teacher training that I did, we actually didn't do that much teaching practice. Whereas we try to, particularly as the course progresses, put aside or save us a lot of time aside for us to do the teaching practice, because it's through doing the teaching practice that you learn how to teach. So yeah, as things progress, that becomes more and more like the center point of the days. Which I think is nice and really valuable.
And just one thing to add, going back on one of the earlier questions, we also teach people how to sequence classes, because that isn't always taught on a training. Sometimes you're given a sequence and you go out into the world with that sequence, whereas on this training we do teach you how to sequence. And I was surprised, because I do teach a sequencing workshop separate from the training, and I was surprised by the amount of people that came in that didn't know how to sequence a class. So yeah, it's just important to know that we do teach you how to structure that sequence of a class as well.
And also, actually, maybe another important thing again to add on to this is that we try to do lots of different, or expose people, expose, strong word, basically introduce people or touch upon like different styles of yoga on the course. But the main thing that we're focusing on is a kind of vinyasa krama type yoga, which is a kind of a progressive and adaptable style of movement-based yoga. So we do little bits of yin, we do bits of breath work, we do bits of restorative. If you're lucky enough to have Suzanne, you might do a little bit of rocket yoga at a certain stage, hatha-inspired things. But our main style, in terms of what we're moving people towards in terms of teaching is Vinyasa yoga.
Which I think is really good, because if you do the training and you plan to teach, it's one of the most it really facilitates then you being able to teach anywhere. If you were to go and do maybe just a set sequence training, it can sometimes restrict you in terms of where you might be able to teach. But with the Vinyasa kind of krama style, you can kind of go out and adapt it then, teach pretty much anywhere. And then maybe just in terms of when somebody does the course and they finish it, is there any support from YogaHub after they finish the training? What is that kind of?
Yeah, so this is, honestly, this is like my favorite thing about the trainings here at the YogaHub. So I'm sure a lot of you guys will be familiar with the YogaHub, but just if you're not, we're studio based here in Dublin. And we have several locations around the city. We have a location in the centre of town in Camden Street. We've locations in Blackrock, Castleknock, Swords, Phibsborough, Point Square. So we've quite a few studios, which means that we're always looking for teachers, basically. And when you come and do a training here with us, it's kind of like you're kind of entering into that teaching community straight away. Like, we have an interest in producing good teachers, and we have a need for good teachers. And as someone who gets lots of teaching applications in the management role that I do at the YogaHub, I personally, rightly or wrongly, I personally give slightly less weight to applications if I don't know the person, because I get loads of kind of like emails from people being like, oh, I've done this teacher training here and there and whatever. And it's not that I don't, it's not that I dismiss them out of hand, but when there's someone who I know, who's been through the training with us, and I've seen their progression, I've seen their practice, I know their personality, and that's someone I'm looking to give a chance to, if you know what I mean. So I'm not saying this to guarantee anybody like a job teaching yoga with us, just if you do the training with us, but you are kind of getting your foot on the ladder to a certain degree. And I know for me, for example, when I did my first teacher training, when I was done, it was very much like, just like, all right, nice knowing you, see you later. Whereas here, we try to create an environment where we're interested in your progression even after the training is finished. Whether that means you're teaching with us, or even if you're not, we want to see people grow and develop and get the most out of teaching yoga. So that's one of my absolute favorite things about the training courses here, because it can be hard to take that first step. It can be hard to get your foot in the door. And I'm really proud of the fact that we have a lot of people who have done trainings with us now teaching with us. We have 2 of them right here who are now like leading trainings with us. If I look across the schedule at the YogaHub over any given week, I can see like a huge number of teachers who have trained with us, and some of our most popular teachers, some of our most like impactful teachers. And I think that's like a testament to the community that we have here. So yeah, it's something I'm quite proud of.
Yeah, great. And to add to that as well, and just because you haven't done your training here, there is a couple of teachers that teach at the studio that I do mentorship with as well. So there is lots of support from the teachers within the studio to support other teachers at the studio. So I always felt here that people would have my back and would try to help me progress as much as I can. Yeah. And that's what I try to give back to newer teachers as well, and to students just coming out of the training.
Any other questions that have come to your mind throughout the episode?
One thing that I did think of was, because it's a Yoga Alliance certified course, it is within Yoga Alliance, their courses, you have to have 100% of the training done. And what's really good with this training is that there's a Blackrock training, a Castleknock training, and a Camden training, and they're normally within a week of each other. So if you can't do a weekend, you can then drop in on the Camden one, or you can drop in on the Blackrock one, and you can make up your time that way, which I think is really useful, and a good thing to flag.
Absolutely. Yeah, Shane was saying in order to qualify from the course, like 100% attendance is required. But particularly on the 6-month courses, like life happens. People get married, people get sick, people get pregnant. And we're not here to try and make anybody's life any more difficult than it needs to be. So if something comes up and you can't attend a day on the training that you have signed up to, you can either repeat that day with one of the trainings in one of the other locations. You can repeat the day on a later iteration of the course. There is options for private catch-ups if required. So yeah, we'll always find a way to make sure you get that 100% attendance in a way that works for everybody. So yeah, well remembered, Jane.
But if you're watching this and you have more questions about the training that maybe we didn't answer today, you can always contact us at YogaHub. You can head over to the YogaHub website. There's a teacher training tab. We have a fantastic teacher training coordinator as well, Miles, who's happy to answer any questions that interested people have. And we're always available as well to chat to anybody either in the studio or maybe even over the phone if you have follow-up questions. So yeah, if you're thinking about teacher training, we'd absolutely love you to join us.
And the only final thing that I would add is if you're thinking of doing a teacher training, whether it's with us, whether you decide to do it somewhere else, like if you have that interest, if you're feeling that kind of pull towards it, I would highly recommend it, like genuinely. Again, can't guarantee anybody or anything, but I do think for a lot of people, there is a bit of a like before and after thing when it comes to having done your teacher training. I know very few people who have ever regretted, giving it a go. Because this is a really beautiful practice and there's so much to be gained, and so much that you can pull out of yourself through the process of learning to teach. So yeah, whether it's with us, whether it's someone else, if you have that that little kind of spark that's pulling you towards it, definitely follow up with it for sure.
Okay, great. So that's everything from us. So thank you so much for listening, and hopefully we might see you on a teacher training in YogaHub sometime soon.